Good day to you. It's Dr. Tony. I am excited to share with you some of the myths that we hear very rarely, but we probably should talk about it more often when it comes to boundaries. I hear lots of people talking about the boundaries that they're going to put in place for this or that. And let's talk about some of the myth busting we should do first, because it's not as simple as that, or we would have done it from the beginning. A great example, since it's National Infertility Awareness Week. Great example is in one of my infertility groups. I was in several because I was struggling with the diagnosis and trying to figure out next steps. So I was reading all the posts that were coming through there pretty frequently because I was trying to just kind of keep up with what was new versus what research had already done. So this lady was talking about how she was so excited. She's finally gotten pregnant after all these years, and it was time for the shower. And some friends were throwing the shower, and she was asked for the list of people who would be included. Who all do you want to invite? So her friends were asking her about this. And her sister, obviously, was one of the top people on the list. Well, her sister let her know that, oh, I'm not going to be coming. What? I've waited all these years. I'm so excited. What do you mean? She's like, well, you know how I feel about, some of the things I'm going through personally regarding her infertility as well, and, not ever being able to have children, etc. And so she said, I didn't mention it to you until now, but I just don't feel like I can be there on that day. And it was this huge controversy because people are like, but that's your sister. You should absolutely show up for her. How are you going to have the whole family there and you're not there? What about all of the pictures? What about, just putting your feelings on hold and supporting your loved one? Debate back and forth, but real talk, it's a lot of stress and strain for many of us to just do what the social expectations are. That's what gets us in trouble. This is why so many women are struggling with burnout and so many are struggling with boundaries in the first place. The social responsibilities and norms that are constantly repeated to us put us in a really awful predicament. So as a certified executive coach who helps a lot of women get out of burnout and break through some of the martyrdom and good girl cycles, this is an opportunity for us to have a conversation that's very difficult, because one of the myths of boundaries is that you think it'll help you avoid conflict. Boundaries do not help you avoid conflict. They do, but inadvertently. So you have to be super clear about some things before you set them, because your good girl thinking, oh, I'll just do what everybody wants me to do and keep the peace, will send you down a very difficult road. Some of us also have decision fatigue. So this is just really yet another thing to do. But number one, people will ask you, do you have boundaries for different people? And in this particular case, that's a great example. The answer was yes. She's like, well, I can hang out with my other family members and hang out with my other friends under these circumstances, but this one, I just don't think that I'm ready. So that's a good example of when you set a boundary that's not really one size fits all. Like, hey, I can hang out with my sister, but really, this is not the right time for me. All right. So number two, boundaries are selfish. So there's a lot of talk when someone is upset with you about a boundary that you are sticking with. Okay. You want to find out how somebody really feels or how they really handle the world, give them bad news. If you've been saying yes all this time and then you think that you're going to just stick a boundary in there and it's going to solve all your problems, that would be a myth. So there are people who will try to make you feel like that, oh, boundaries are selfish. Boundaries are not selfish, but don't be surprised when somebody tries to label you or say something negative about a boundary that you are upholding or bringing to the forefront, because they were benefiting from when you said yes all the time. So don't be, so surprised when someone tries to label that as selfish. You really have to be careful listening to people who obviously were had something to gain from your open door policy, if you will. Number 3, setting boundaries is telling someone what to do. So, one example would be that's your sister, back to the shower, baby shower example. That's your sister. So therefore, you can't enforce your plan because it's her. No, that's not how that works. You don't need to tell other people what they should do, and they really probably should not be trying to tell you that. So be super careful. Boundaries are oftentimes about us and what we need or what we are trying to achieve. Okay. So sometimes you need personal space. Sometimes you need a break. Sometimes you need rest. Boundaries are usually because of something we need or because someone else isn't they're not taking initiative to not ask you or avoid overextending their welcome, if you will. So sometimes you have to say something about a boundary, but you don't need to think of boundaries as you telling them. So let's say you're arguing with someone. You don't have to tell them, hey, don't yell at me. You can just say, when you raise your voice, this is how I feel. And if this continues, here's what I'm planning to do. You can certainly do that. And some people will figure that that's selfish. And they will also say that, oh, well, you're telling me not to X, Y, or Z. But you're like, no, I'm just letting you know. I'm just informing you that the old me is not going to show up. Okay. So boundaries are not about telling other people what to do, but they are about you being clear about some things that matter to you. Number 4, boundaries. Boundaries hurt relationships. There are people who will try to make you feel guilty. Raise your hand if you've ever been manipulated by a loved one. Oftentimes it's a family member, and sometimes it's a romantic relationship. Someone is trying to say that, well, if you love me, fill in the blank. Has anybody ever said that to you? Well, if you loved me, you would turn that off. I remember coaching a boards client who was really, really up against the wall. If they did not pass this exam, their pay would be decreased. They would automatically be at risk for losing their job. And the path to try to get certified was going to be an appeal process. And this has already been going on for years. And it was always something that got in the way. So she and I worked together to figure out what would be her new plan, her new approach. And boards coaching is rough because the knowledge is one piece, but y'all are brilliant. That's not necessarily what's going on here. She got one of those statements thrown at her. Oh, well, if you loved me, then you would put that to the side and go to this party, go to this play, watch this show. Why am I not important anymore? It was a minimal amount of time. This is just a short window of opportunity to achieve a lifelong goal versus someone trying to make you feel bad about putting yourself at the top. If they loved you, shouldn't they be promoting you feeling good? Shouldn't they be promoting you taking care of yourself and making sure you're getting your rest and making sure that you're putting the energy and effort towards this future that you may be building together? I promise you, there are plenty of folks who will say that boundaries hurt relationships because maybe they have their own agenda and maybe y'all are not heading in the same direction. Family comes up quite a bit. So I'm going to touch on that. Parents and elders, they love to tell you this is how we do things in this family. And you have not subscribed to this way of thinking in some time, but you're not home that much. Maybe you moved away at a certain point in your life and now it's the holidays. Man, let me tell you something. Boundaries are not about other people. That's the last point I want to make. Boundaries are not always about other people. What if you're trying to lose weight? A great example is, oh my gosh, I don't want to go over there for the holidays. They pile my plate full of food. Raise your hand if you have family members like this. They want to pile your plate up with all of these goodies, and you're like, but I said I wanted to lose weight, but I said that this wasn't a good time for me. Your breath in some of these settings and trying to explain your point of view and why it's important that you're not exposed to sugar right now because you really don't feel much self control or whatever, and you're really trying to stay the course. They don't want to hear any of those things. So sometimes the boundaries are not about other people. The boundaries are for you. The boundaries are set there because you're having difficulty breaking a bad habit, or you're trying to make sure that you don't open up the gateway drug of sugar to start feeding your face at this, event. And then you get back home and you stop and get snacks. So boundaries are not always about other people. Boundaries are not selfish. A lot of times it's the only way for you to take care of all your responsibilities. And I do mean all of them. Everybody's important. One of the first exercises you're going to do if you work with me is for us to figure out what all is important to you and what is suffering right now. Most of y'all have an area or two in your life that's suffering. And I'm not just talking about your self-care and your sleep. I'm speaking about the dreams you have, the skills you have, the ideas that you've put on the shelf. All of this comes from the way we were trained to think about ourselves and think about our value. And I want to make sure that you know that that's not going to be sustainable. A lot of people will end up with regret if they don't start realizing that nothing's going to change unless you make different choices. A lot of boundaries are about choices. So the number one myth that I think exists in the world where women are taking care of everybody is that we're not even allowed to have any. Well, that's the ultimate BS. What are you teaching your children if you let them think that there's no limits? We don't want that. We tell them there's limits all the time and do the opposite. So don't be a hypocrite. Don't teach your kids one thing and show them something else. I'm calling you out. That's what I'm here to do as the coach. And if you want help figuring out what you do want to do, how you do want to plan the rest of your career, your life, your future, how you can make sure that all these other pieces of you that you've been neglecting to work and make money and take care of everyone. If you are ready to do something different, or you're not even sure what it is, it's a good idea to get in touch. drtonymd.com/talk. This world we're living in right now, you have access, but you're overwhelmed. Decision fatigue is part of the reason why boundaries are necessary. You can't just let the internet suck you in. You can't let TV suck you in. You can't let work take up all your energy and your time. So I want to encourage you to figure out what is worth protecting. And I hope you come up with the fact that you are number one on that list. It's Dr. Tony. I am here to help you build the life you want, both, your ambitions, your career, and at home, the many hats that you wear, the many different people that love you. You need to get satisfaction and fulfillment out of the life that you've built for yourself. And if that's not happening, it's always the right time to make an appointment. Talk soon. Next visit, we will do a survey in the group, but it looks like self-care is on the menu. And I'm not talking about the regular kind. We're going to talk about the different types of self-care and how all of them are important and some to look out for. Yes, there are some you need to be wary of. Talk to you soon.